And today we're going to talk about the golden age of Finnish art. That's 1880 to 1810. And the art here, not this one in particular, this one's more humoristic, is about realism. It's about ethnography and realism, sort of looking at what Finland is. Because beforehand, there were no real art about normal day Finnish life. Everything was about the Russian Empire and the imperial family. So things changed around this time. But before we go into that, let's look at this picture here. This picture is obviously humoristic. It's playing fun with it. It's quite interesting that the artist, this guy in the back, we're going to talk about him. He's a funny little guy that did quite a lot, very famous, very popular, all over the place, in both positive and negative ways. And the three guys in front is actually not artists, they're composers. They are some of the people who created Finnish music during this period of time. We're just not going to talk about them. But what this picture sort of symbolizes as well is that art and the paint is together with the music. And throughout the history of this era, we're going to see that everything is sort of interconnected with one another. Every single story, poem, and the rest are painted or talked about, singed about, and the rest. I should introduce myself as well before I go on. I don't usually do art lectures. My focus is on religion. That's my expertise, is what I studied. But it's really hard to do just religion, so I got into other things, such as history, religious politics, and the rest. So looking into society, and I've been around. I've got invited by the German government to speak, for example, which was a fun thing. Didn't lead to anything, but it was still fun. It should have led to something, but yeah, Germans. So there are three forms that we're going to look at, and every painting has one of them. So if you can see them or spot them, that's really good. So first, the realistic, which is the mundane. It's the everyday life of a Finn. This has never really been painted before, as I said. So here they come. This is simple pictures. This is paintings of a mother playing with a child, sewing, cutting hairs, and the rest. Just everyday life. The religious is two things. They're Christian, they're Lutheran, and a lot of what they taught early on in school was to do Christian art. So that influence came along in the earlier period of this time, but it's the second one that is more interesting, Kalevala. Now, none of you, do anyone know what that is? No. Okay, so Kalevala is a poem. It's a collective of poems created in early 1800s by a man going around the Finnish countryside and just listening to people's stories and writing it down. So in a way, this is the paganism of Finland, and it revolutionized everything. Because beforehand, again, I'm going to come back to this over and over again, everything was about Russia, nothing about themselves. But doing this ethnographical poems, just going around looking, they got an insight of who we are, what's our religious history, and the rest. And paintings, there's a lot of paintings with that. Because paintings in this, with Kalevala, didn't exist before, so any painting here is they became extremely popular. Everybody mimicked them, everybody copied each other to do as much Kalevala as possible, because it didn't exist before. And if you did it, you will get notoriety, like noticed by the Finnish higher-ups, and everybody wants to buy your painting, so it's very popular. And the last one, the patriotic. This is more in the later times, when I would say in the end of the golden era, and even a little bit afterwards, because the art and everything that happened did create a nation, did create Finland in the end. So many of these artists became propaganda artists. They did paintings of war, of beautiful Finnish women, of Mannerheim, if you know what that is. It's the higher general of Finland during the time, and the rest. But I want to show you the first example. This one has, I would say, everything in it of those three forms. So you have the mundane, the woman. This is just everyday life. It's beautiful in many ways. There's a few things hidden here. Well, first of all, I wouldn't say the food. Just that simple thing. What did Finnish people eat? That was not that common. So painting that in and of itself is lovely. But then you have two figures in the back, Alexander II and Elias Löfgren. Alexander II is the Tsar of Russia during the period, and Finns actually like Alexander II because they gave them a lot of autonomy and they could have their own laws in Finland. And Elias is the one who wrote Kalevala. So the reason why I chose this picture is the first one, because you can actually see, at least I see, a correlation between the generation today and the generation of tomorrow influenced by these two. Nothing the artist, I will not actually mention more than this, Siegfried August Kenyon. Many people argue that he was the first one to start this, but that would mean that Golden Age was started in the 1860s, or 1870s. And there's a lot of argumentation exactly when this started, but it's irrelevant when exactly it started. But some people argue him, but regardless, this painting is gorgeous. So we have, in the beginning I'm going to talk about 4 people. Then I'm going to talk about history, and then we're going to do some artist appreciation in the end of different artists during this period of time. But these are the 4 main important ones. Adolf von Becker, he is the teacher of everything. He was down in France, he learned the realist art and brought it back to Finland, so he could teach people there. And a lot of the people during this time was privately tutored by him. Albert Edenfelt, he's the one who popularized Finnish realism, and everybody wanted to be and everybody knew. Aro Järnefelt, he's one of the people who, probably for many reasons, but some of the most popular paintings is also from Järnefelt, and then Akseli Gallen-Kallela. So Kallela, yeah, we'll talk about more him a little later. But he's the one who did the painting in the beginning. He does a lot of paintings, that's all I can say. Yeah. So yeah, I already talked about Adolf, but here's one of his paintings. The reason, again, many people say, oh, this is just a realist painting. It's not really anything to do with ethnography of Finland or what they are, but it's still a beautiful painting regardless. And he taught a lot of people to draw in this form. I should say also, if anyone has any questions or any opinion, you're allowed to voice it whenever you want. I don't have a keen eye of art in details that you guys have, so. I see Dante in the back, which is funny. But again, his name come up many times during the time because he, again, private tutor, so I have to mention him. Oh?
I just noticed that it's an artist in his studio. I see the palette with the brushes now next to Dante and the easel, so he's actually, at first I thought it was a grandfather dressing the grandchild or something like that, but it's a painter probably preparing the model or something.
Ah!
Because it's an easel there,
yeah, you're right.
And brushes next to Dante on the table with Dante.
That might be.
I imagine.
I have not looked into the history of this one in particular, but yeah.
Is it called the first one?
No. I just wrote the first one,
Okay.
He's the first one. Yeah, pardon me, I don't always have a description of the paintings because it doesn't fit. But we're going to go into Edelfelt. Yeah. So when it comes to Adolf Edelfelt, he was the one who he was the one who popularized realism in Finland, but in particular he popularized it because of the paintings that he did. So he focused on realism, but he focused on realism on its arts, its poems, its history, and the rest. This one, The Tales of N.C. Ståhl, or there's another name in Sweden, Pojkabojorna. This is from the Swedish-Russian War in the early 1800s, where Sweden lost Finland. And this poem, written by John Ludwig Lundberg, that talks about this era and have created poems and songs of this era. And these, Lundberg's book, the first verses, is part of the national anthem of Finland. So this painting is about the boys going out to war, he's already injured. This is the German boys with the army in the back. But if you look at the period of this time, early 1800s, before everything started, this is the painting that's always going to come up. Because this represents when, again, Sweden lost Finland, Finland lost itself. Because we had a quite good relationship between Finland and Sweden. They used Swedish law and the rest, so when Russians took over, they were afraid they would lose everything. They didn't early on, luckily, but they did in the end. So this one is part of the historical epic, created into art.
I didn't know if I caught that, but you're from a Finnish background, is that right?
No.
You're not?
No.
What's your interest in this?
With this one, it's about a year.
The subject, I mean, why Finnish?
Yeah. A year ago, 10 months ago, I saw some paintings and I did my research on this topic. So, from that I know, but I did a video on it, a little documentary, and I got in contact with a few Finns from it that actually own some of their paintings and things like that. So when I mentioned here, when I met a woman here, I talked about that and she said, show it to us. So I could do topics about quite a lot of type of poetry, sorry. I can do quite a lot of art in different forms. Usually what I focus on is surrealism, futurism, and avant-garde, but I do like realism myself quite a lot. So we looked into this one. It is Edelfelt. And same thing goes to the next painting. Here's the religious background. But when I looked at this painting the first time, I thought it's a boring Christian drawing. Like, everybody does it. But no. Even here, he correlates to a history. This is one of the sister texts of the Kalevala that tells about Christian stories of Finland. And she's one of the people in that story. So even Christian paintings here is about Finland. So everything comes back to Finland. Yeah. Again, he loves the Christian, and a lot of the painters here also have done murals for churches and the rest like this. But this is just again to show you the Christian things in the Christian story of it. Another realist painting of him. I'm now just showing a bit of his art so you can see the different arts that he does. This is also about the war. This is people who fled from the village with the burning village in the back and the army there. So you can, again, just to show. Yeah. This form was the one that was actually most common before the Golden Age. Form of paintings of royalty. Helsinki, the school there, the art school in Helsinki, wanted to only draw this type of thing, either about the Russians or the Swedes. This is about the Swedes. This is a Swedish king mocking a dead man by pulling his beard. And you see the next one as well, same sort of deal. You have Nicholas II and the grandchildren of Alexander II. I don't know exactly what connection they have, but we can talk about Nicholas a bit also. But the funny thing about Nicholas, when it comes to Finland, they hate him. So they love Alexander II because they give him autonomy. When it came to Nicholas, or Nikolai, he wanted to get control of Finland. He wanted to Russify Finland as much as possible. So someone in this era drawing him is also a bit of a spit on the entire idea of it. But he had to, because you're still part of Russia. You have to draw it. And the last one is the one that I'm showing the everyday life. So this is an extremely popular painting of it. It's gorgeous, but it's also showing that, yes, it's a fisherman. Like with the mundane part, it's not anything that stands out in the story it wants to tell per se, but that's the good thing. This is not an epic of any sort. This is just everyday life of a Finnish sailor. Yeah. So this painting here is another one. So he spent a lot of time in France and in Luxembourg. It's actually where he got his education from. This painting here, nothing with it, but the funny thing is when I showed this one, and I got a comment that people actually have this original painting in their collection. Because Edelfelt, the weird thing about it, and the weird thing about the Finns, they're well known and they're liked. They talk to people, they go out, this is just a random person. Yeah, my father knew him. Quite amazing. Yes, Jarnefelt. With Janefeld, I don't have all too much to say, but it's showing the next painting that was gonna blow your mind. And here you have Gallen. It's the Gallela again painting him off. So Gallela, he was everywhere. And with Janefeld, you can see here. That's, yeah, is what it is there. But this one, yeah, it's gorgeous. So what Janefeld did, that no one else really did in the same way, he went out to the Finnish countryside, just traveling and seeing what he could see. This one, it looks horrible first time we look at it. I didn't know what it was first. But what they're doing, they're actually destroying and burning down trees to create farmland. This is a very common practice in the north of Finland. Till this day, it's actually even common. So again, here, this is something that is extremely common, but has it ever been shown before? No. And not in the brutal way that he wants to describe it, with soot on the woman's face or the girl's face. It's every day, it's children, it's the rest, and hasn't been shown before. And this one is actually my favorite of them. This one is drawn in France, so it's not about Finland, but I personally love this one. It's mostly just for the shadows. This is a French bar, coffee bar type of deal, that he has drew, and I love it. So, only for that reason I'm showing it. Yes, and Järafelt, I got a comment also with Järafelt that a person watched it, has three sketchings and 2 paintings. And that is Mannerheim. Järafelt, like everybody else, in the end had to draw propaganda. The end of the golden era is propaganda, and here is Mannerheim. Mannerheim was, as I said, the higher general, marshal general, I think you can call it, of Finland during the time, and everybody loved him. He was part of the Civil War in 1919, and big part of the Soviet invasion of Russia, and then the continuation war. This is back in the 40s. Yeah, no, 30s, 40s, yeah, around there. Got exactly there. Continuation was in the 40s. All right. Now, let's talk about Gallen. Axeli Gallen. So he breaks a lot of the things I talked about because he's a bit special. So he's been there, he's seen it all. He wants to branch out. And it's this branching out that also ended up killing the art forms. But this one is actually in the later stages of his life, around the conflicts, 1917, yeah. It's a suicide, but if I'm correct, now I forgot the head of it, it's more or less Finland killing itself. And what I like with this painting, it's also the art killing itself. So I usually say with this type of paintings, the more visceral, violent paintings, you can never have the mundane again. Once you go beyond a certain point, you can't go back.
He dated that painting 1906 to 1917.
Yeah.
It took him 11 years to produce it, or did he do you know if he revisited the painting?
I can't tell.
On it some more?
I forgot what this was. But yeah, he knows it. So I'm going to little bit talk about Gallen, because if you look into this era, it's always him you're going to stumble across, and you're going to stumble across him again and again and again. So he's got his education in the 1880s in Paris. There he did his realism, like most other people during this period. He got contacts like Albert Edelfelt, and he got contact with the rest of the Finnish artists. And he did paintings like this, which, again, the mundane, but this is not per se about Finland, this is just about the realism of France in this particular moment. But he also got very famous in Sweden, having contacts with our leading novel writer, August Strindberg, which loved to have connections with Finns during this period of time. So he married this woman, he moved back to Finland, they had 3 children together. But during one of his trips, travels around, one of his children died. And this changed his worldview and perspective and everything. Now he wanted to be away, he wanted to grieve He just wanted to be everywhere, just so he doesn't think about death anymore. But painting in here, I'm going to show 3 collections of these paintings. This is Kalevala. So, I can tell you a story of Kalevala. It's complicated but simple. I'm not going to say the name. There are 2 lands, Kalevala and the north. One person in Kalevala flew by the air, swinged over to the north, was saved by an old woman, a hag, and thanks for saving his life, she wanted something. And she wanted an artifact, the saddle, which is a little round machine with 3 holes in it. One gets gold, one gets wheat, and one gets, what's the other one? Coins. Wheat? Yeah, whatever. Wheat, gold, salt, I think it was. Point being, that's infinite. It's an infinite machine. So here's them creating the saddle. They did it over and over again until you create the right one. And you can see it in this other painting, this one. This is the man who flew, and this is the old witch. And what you also see, now we've gone away from realism. Now it's not about realism anymore. And this form, the way it painted it, for me, he looks like Jesus. I don't know if anyone else sees it. So it goes back to the old Christian tradition. That's what it is. So they managed to create it. The man took it and fled to his country. The old hag, learned about it. They did it, if you wonder how they combated or fought her, they sang. They did poems and they sang. This is how they beat each other in conflict. But one of the people that traveled back had such an ugly voice, so she woke the witch up because he was asleep, and he created an army with this ugly voice for the witch, waking up an army, and the witch turned into a harpy. This one. That's the old hag, that's the army in the back, and that's the man who just created the sample. And this painting is one of the most famous ones. But it's got it. So what happened was she managed to grab the sample with her fangs, and they cut her fangs off with the knife, making the sample drop into the water and it got destroyed. So it's not a good story. It's like it was a waste of time and no one gave it. But that's the point. And how they figured this out was just by listening to people talk. But here you have paintings of them. Again, with Gallen, this is also near the end. After he created these, everybody tried to copy him. But I should say also, Gallen was not the first one to create Kalevala paintings. There were other people. Because how Gallen is, he did it, took it, got more famous than everybody else who did it. Gone. You had to focus on something else, otherwise you're going to fail. That's him all the time. But with Gallen as well, what's the bad part about it? So after all this fame, after all this greatness, he also became a propaganda artist in the very end to Mannerheim. Actually directly hired by him. And even when Gallen died, Mannerheim was at his funeral on San Albigis. And again, this man is like God of Finland. There's no one greater than this man. So being hired by him, ego boost, but it's all about propaganda. And you see that's actually a big painting in his back here of the same image as before, a big mural. Yeah, so I will talk about Kalevala, but here is him again, Elias Lönnroth. And you can see here is the book where you can buy today. And in the front is that image. But I should also point out what Elias did that actually influenced the paintings was ethnography, was going around listening and just writing down. So this is sort of what changed a lot of things with this era, because there was people actually going around and listening. It was listening and then painting off that. Either painting off it directly or painting off by just hearing the story and painting that off. So he created a tradition 1850, I should have written it down, 1840, 1850, when he did it. He gets criticism, mostly that people didn't actually believe that he walked around, that he just created the stories himself. But he didn't create the stories, he just wrote it down. And there's a few other ones he did that also are national epics at this point. Yeah. This image is also one during this period of time by a person. But he only made this one. Well, he made multiple. He only made one that was actually very popular. So this is way after the era, but it's very important to actually talk about this period to understand what effect the Golden Age had. 1917, Parliament was created before, but 1917 they wrote down the declaration of we want to be independent. They asked around, they asked Sweden, Norway, Denmark, France, I think it was, that you could see us as an independent nation. But they said no. What you have to do is ask the Russians, which is by this point the Petrograd Soviets in Lenin. They asked twice and they actually got it. They got independence by asking the Soviets and they got it. But this painting here, and this kind of sums up why they want independence in the first place. The eagle is Russia, two-headed eagle. The beautiful woman is Finland. Again, you can't draw yourself as something ugly. It has to be a beautiful woman. And what she's holding is actually the law. So with Alexander II, they were allowed to make their own laws. But when Nicholas came in, he said no more independence of laws. Now if you want to create a new law, you have to ask the Russian, Nicholas, to ratify your laws before it can become law. And that is like, no. We have independence all this time, why do you want to do this now? And the point was to Russify Finland so they wouldn't rebel in the future, which got them to rebel. Congratulations. And immediately, pretty much afterwards, in January or February, there was a civil war between Finnish Reds and Finnish Whites, meaning the Social Democrats of Finland, which was the leading party, and the Whites, which were people who didn't like the Social Democrats. And it was more or less a proxy war between the Soviets and the Germans. And the Whites won. And the one leading that was Mannerheim. Again, let's go back to Mannerheim. And the point being that is for Germany to get a lot of control. But the reason why I say art main focus and art key propaganda, what the independence kind of did, it was a peaceful independence. This is
Hello, it's me, home again. So I did a bit of a mistake. I didn't record the last 30 minutes, or well, 25 minutes, because the video camera for some reason only recorded 30 minutes. It is what it is. In the end, we mostly just talked about different painters, and in a sense, the video already exists from before, so I will link it, and you can watch that if you want to know more detail about the different painters during this period of time. And I'd like to thank the Art Academy for inviting me in. The name of it is the Swedish Academy of Realist Art. There's a link in the description for anyone who's interested. It was very fun to do, quite unusual, I should say. It's the first time I'm doing an art lecture live. I usually do it about history or religion. So I learned a lot. It's actually quite a difference depending on what you do, because if it's history or religion, it's just talk, non-stop, more or less. Here, I have to give the people a chance to look at the painting. I just want to continue going so I can continue talking. It's like, look, and it's like, what can I say? Like, appreciation takes a little while, takes more than a few seconds. So it was quite interesting. So I learned something. And what I learned is actually also have more fun paintings. You don't always need the main ones. Because in the end, I made a joke about the symbolic Finnish painting. I don't really understand the symbolism, so I decided not to pick it in. But it was still funny, so I described it, and they were like in the end, "Oh, could we see that painting?" It's like, yes, absolutely. And they laughed at it. So, yeah, I learned a lot. It was really fun, and I'm very grateful. And thank you for watching, and hopefully the Academy want to invite me in again. And next time, because it seems like the audience didn't just want to hear about realism, so I would love to talk about, Russian futurism. It's actually one of the main ones I love. I can talk about that forever. Or other topics I've talked about in the past, but we'll see. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for watching.